The first sign came on a Tuesday. Trade Captain. Vorthek was waiting for his usual human coffee supplier at Station Nexus 7 when the message arrived. Short and simple. Contract ended. Thanks for business. That was it. No reason, no goodbye meeting, no chance to negotiate better terms. Just gone. Vorthek stared at his screen for a long time. Humans loved their contracts. They argued about every detail and fought over every credit. They never just walked away from good business. Something felt wrong. 3 days later, the pattern became clear. Ambassador Kethver of the Zelani Collective sat in his office reading reports. Human trading posts across 12 sectors had shut down in the past week. Not destroyed or attacked, just closed. The humans had packed everything and left. They took their equipment, their people, even their trash. The stations were completely empty, sir, his aide said, bringing another datapad. More reports from the Outer Rim? Kethver read quickly. Human research stations going dark. Human mining operations abandoned. Human diplomatic staff requesting immediate transport home. All of them leaving quietly, without drama or demands. Have they said anything? Any official statement? Kethver asked. Nothing, sir. The human ambassador won't take calls. Their embassy staff are packing. I heard they're leaving tomorrow. Kethver frowned. In 30 years of dealing with humans, he had never seen them act like this. Humans were loud. They complained about everything. They demanded meetings and explanations and formal procedures. They never just disappeared across the galaxy. Other council members were noticing the same thing on Altair Prime. Dock workers watched human cargo ships leave half empty. The humans paid their fees and followed all the rules, but they weren't taking new contracts. They weren't buying supplies for long trips. They were going home. In the Vega system, a human military patrol that had been stationed there for 8 years simply left. They filed the proper paperwork and followed departure protocols, but they ignored all questions about why they were going. The base commander just said their mission was complete. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. They're up to something, said Counselor Vexhai, a tall gray alien with too many eyes. Humans always have a plan. This is probably some kind of negotiation trick. Maybe they're scared, suggested Counselor Brent, whose species looked like walking trees. The new tariff laws hit their trade routes hard. Maybe they can't compete anymore. Ambassador Kethver wasn't convinced. I've dealt with humans for decades. When they're angry, they shout. When they're scared, they build bigger weapons. When they want to negotiate, they never stop talking. I've never seen them just leave. Perhaps that's because they know they're not welcome, said High Counselor Zenith, the most senior member of the council. Her species, the Ethereals, had lived for thousands of years and considered themselves the wisest race in the galaxy. Humans have always been too aggressive, too unpredictable. Maybe they finally understand they don't belong in civilized space. Many council members nodded. Humans had always been a problem. They started fights, ignored diplomatic protocol, and built weapons that made other species nervous. Their colonies were messy and loud. Their traders argued about everything. Their military acted without permission and asked forgiveness later. Good riddance, muttered Counselor Vexhai. Maybe now we can have some peace. But peace wasn't what? They got. Captain Sarah Chun of the human ship Wanderer was one of the last to leave the outer territories. She had spent 5 years mapping dangerous sectors and keeping trade routes safe. Her crew was packing the last of their equipment when a message came from Zelani ships nearby. Human vessel, why are you leaving? Is there a threat we should know about? Sarah looked at her communications officer, Lieutenant Park. He shrugged. What do we tell them, Captain? Sarah thought for a moment. The orders from Earth were clear. Pack up, come home, say nothing. But these aliens had worked with her crew for years. They had shared dangers and saved each other's lives. Tell them ... Sarah started, then stopped. How could she explain? How could she make them understand what was coming? The council would never believe it. They would think it was a human trick or a human lie. Tell them to be careful, she said. Finally, Tell them to watch the deep sensors. And tell them ... double quotes. She paused again. Tell them we're sorry. The message confused the Zilani captain, but before he could ask for details, the Wanderer was gone, jumping to hyperspace towards Sol. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human ships leaving with cryptic warnings. Human scientists destroying their research rather than leaving it behind. Human military units returning to Earth with sealed orders and worried faces. The evacuation took 3 months. 3 months of humans quietly closing down everything they had built in the galaxy. 3 months of them saying goodbye to alien friends who didn't understand what was happening. 3 months of them pretending everything was normal while they prepared for something terrible. Dr. Elena Vasquez was the last human scientist to leave the Kepler research station. She had spent 12 years studying quantum anomalies in the local space. Her work was important, but the orders were absolute. Destroy everything and come home. She stood in her empty lab, looking at the quantum monitoring equipment she had built with her own hands. The machines hummed quietly, watching. Space for disturbances that most aliens couldn't even detect. For 12 years, these sensors had kept watch. For 12 years, they had sent data back to Earth about things that moved in the dark between galaxies. Elena activated the destruction sequence and walked away. Behind her, the machines died one by one. The sensors went dark. The early warning system that had protected this sector for over a decade was gone. She didn't look back. The galaxy noticed when the humans stopped coming to council meetings. They noticed when human ships disappeared from space lanes and human voices went quiet on communication channels. But most council members were relieved. Humans had always been trouble. The galaxy would be better without them. Only a few voices expressed worry. A Centauri diplomat who had worked closely with human traders for 20 years. A Proxima military officer who had fought alongside human marines against pirates. A vegan scientist who had collaborated with human researchers on deep space studies. Something's wrong, the Centauri diplomat told anyone who would listen. Humans don't just give up. They fight for everything. If they're leaving, there's a reason. But the council wasn't interested in worrying about humans. They had their own plans. With humans gone, the galaxy was theirs to shape as they wanted. The aggressive, unpredictable humans were finally out of the way. They had no idea what the humans had been protecting them from in the Sol system. Earth's defenses powered up for the first time in 3 centuries. Massive orbital stations that had been hidden behind sensor screens became visible. Weapons that had been disguised as research equipment revealed their true purpose. The human fleet, larger than any alien nation had imagined, gathered around. Their homeworld. Admiral Jackson stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, watching the last human ships arrive from across the galaxy. His officers worked quietly, preparing for what was coming. They had done their duty for 300 years, protecting aliens who hated them for it. Now they would protect only their own. All ships report ready, Admiral, his aide said. Good, Admiral Jackson replied, looking out at the stars. Now we wait. Behind them, Earth's children prepared to face the darkness alone. 6 months after the last human ship left Council space, High Counselor Zenith called a special session. The Great Hall filled with representatives from dozens of species. For the first time in centuries, no human sat in the observer section. Fellow beings, Zenith began, her voice carrying the authority of millennia, we stand at the dawn of a new age. The galaxy is finally free from human interference. No more disruptions to our careful diplomacy. No more aggressive expansions into dangerous sectors. No more questions about our decisions. The hall erupted in approval. Counselor Vexhai stood up, his multiple eyes gleaming. The humans always thought they knew better than us. They ignored our wisdom and pushed into places they shouldn't go. Now we can bring proper order to the galaxy. What about their territories? Asked Counselor Brent. They left behind stations, mining operations, research facilities. Valuable resources just sitting empty? Zenith smiled, an expression that never reached her cold eyes. An excellent point. We cannot let such valuable assets go to waste. I propose we begin immediate annexation of former human territories under the Galactic Stability Protocol. The Stability Protocol had been a dream of the Council for 200 years. A set of laws that would give them complete control over trade, military movements, and resource distribution across the galaxy. The humans had always opposed it, calling it tyranny disguised as order. Without human resistance, the Council could finally implement their vision. All in favor? Zenith asked. Every hand, claw, tentacle, and appendage in the hall rose. The vote was unanimous. Within days, Council fleets moved into former human space. The Zilani took over the mining operations in the Kepler sector. The Ethereals claimed the research stations near the galactic rim. The vegan collective seized the trade posts along the outer shipping lanes. It was almost too easy. The humans had left everything in perfect order. Facilities were clean and organized. Equipment was properly maintained. But something felt strange to the teams taking inventory. Commander Vexra of the Zilani fleet was inspecting a former human research station when she noticed it. These aren't communication arrays, she told her science officer. What are they? The science officer, a young Zilani named Culver, scanned the equipment. Unknown design, Commander. Very sophisticated. The power requirements are massive, but they're not broadcasting anything. They seem to be listening. Listening to what? I don't know. Deep space, maybe? The sensors are pointing toward empty sectors between galaxies, Commander Vexra frowned. Humans always had strange hobbies. Maybe they were looking for signs of other life. It didn't matter now. Strip everything valuable and prepare for demolition. We'll build proper Zilani facilities. Here. Similar scenes played out across dozens of former human installations. Alien teams found equipment they didn't understand, monitoring systems pointing at empty space, and massive power generators that seemed designed for something much larger than simple research. Most of the new occupiers simply scrapped what they couldn't understand. But Dr. Vexhai, the Council's chief scientist, was more curious than most. Bring me everything, he ordered his teams. Every piece of human technology, every data file, every schematic. The humans were primitive, but they occasionally stumbled onto something useful. Dr. Vexhai had always been jealous of human scientific achievements. Despite being younger than most Council species, humans had developed faster-than-light travel, quantum computers, and energy weapons that rivaled anything in the galaxy. He was sure they had stolen the technology from somewhere else. No species could advance that quickly on their own. The most interesting find came from a research station in the Perseus Arm, hidden in a reinforced vault. Vexhai's teams discovered a device unlike anything they had seen. It was roughly spherical, covered in crystalline structures that pulsed with internal light. Human writing labeled it as a quantum communication array. Finally, Vexhai said, studying the device in his laboratory. A chance to understand how humans really communicated across such vast distances. His assistants gathered around the artifact. It was beautiful in its complexity, with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. The power requirements were enormous, but the Council had the resources of half the galaxy now. "Sir," said his chief assistant, a nervous creature called Pipton, "shouldn't we study it more before activating it?" The humans left very few technical manuals. The humans were always overly cautious, Vexhai replied dismissively. Look at the design. It's clearly a communication device. Probably their secret to coordinating across interstellar distances. Once we understand how it works, we can build our own network. What Vexhai didn't know was that Dr. Elena Vasquez had stood in this same laboratory 6 months earlier, looking at this same device with tears in her eyes. She had helped build it, along with dozens of others placed strategically around the galaxy. She knew exactly what it did, and the thought of aliens activating it kept her awake at night. But the destruction orders had been clear. All monitoring equipment was to be destroyed when humans evacuated, but this device was different. This device was hardened against tampering, designed to resist damage and continue functioning even if aliens found it. It wasn't a communication Array, it was a beacon. Dr. Vexhai spent 3 weeks studying the device, growing more excited each day. His scans revealed quantum processors more advanced than anything the Council possessed. The power coupling systems were brilliant in their efficiency. The crystalline matrices could store incredible amounts of information. "It's revolutionary," he told High Counselor Zenith during his weekly report. "Once we activate it, we'll be able to communicate instantly across the entire galaxy. No more waiting months for messages to travel between sectors. We can coordinate our new territories perfectly." Zenith was pleased. The annexation of human space was proceeding smoothly. Former human colonies were being reorganized under Council law. Trade routes were being regulated properly. The stability protocol was transforming the galaxy into the ordered society the Council had always envisioned. "When will you be ready to test it?" she asked. "Within days," Vexhai promised. "I just need to complete the power coupling sequence. Then we can send our first message to the entire galaxy announcing the new order." What neither of them understood was that the device had been sending a constant stream of quantum noise into deep space for 3 centuries. A carefully modulated signal that told ancient listeners in the dark between galaxies to stay asleep. The signal was complex, layered with harmonics and frequencies that required exact calibration to maintain. The moment Vexhai activated the device with his crude modifications, that signal would change. Instead of the sleep command that had kept the Dark Dwellers dormant, it would broadcast something else entirely, a dinner bell on the day of the test. Representatives from every major council species gathered in Vexhai's laboratory. This was a historic moment, they were told. The beginning of a new age of galactic communication. High Counselor Zenith stood before the assembled crowd. "Today, we take the final step in establishing true galactic order. With this human device, we will broadcast the stability protocol to every corner of known space. Every world will hear our message simultaneously. Every species will understand that the galaxy now has proper leadership." Dr. Vexhai stood beside the quantum array, his hands hovering over the activation controls. He had dreamed of this moment for years. Finally, he would prove that alien science was superior to human technology. "Begin the sequence," Zenith commanded. "Vexhai, press the activation switch." The device came alive with brilliant light. Energy cascaded through the crystalline matrices. Quantum processors hummed with power. The communication array began broadcasting its signal across space and time, reaching into the deepest corners of the galaxy and beyond. But the message it sent was not what the Council expected. In the deep spaces between galaxies, ancient things that had slept for millennia began to stir. They had been waiting so long for this call, waiting for the barrier to fall and the dinner bell to ring. The feast could finally begin. Dr. Vexhai watched his instruments with growing excitement. "It's working perfectly. The signal is propagating across the entire galaxy. We're receiving acknowledgement signals from—" Wait, his excitement faded to confusion. "These responses aren't coming from our colonies." "What do you mean?" Zenith asked. "The signals are coming from empty space. From sectors with no inhabited worlds, from regions we've never explored." Vexhai's voice grew uncertain, "And they're getting stronger." In the dark between galaxies, massive shapes began to move. They had been sleeping for so long, dreaming of the feast that would come when the Guardians finally failed. The quantum beacon sang its ancient song, calling them home to worlds full of life and energy. The Council had pressed the wrong button, and something in the darkness was very, very hungry. The first reports came from the Outer Rim telescopes 6 hours after Dr. Vexhai activated the beacon. Operator Zenthka was monitoring deep space sensors at the Andromeda Observatory when his screen lit up with impossible readings. He blinked his 4 eyes and checked his instruments twice before calling his supervisor. "Sir, I'm getting some very strange readings from Sector 97. The gravity sensors are showing massive objects, but there's nothing there on visual scans." "Supervisor." Grexville floated over on his gas-filled body. "Equipment malfunction. Run diagnostics." "I already did, sir, 3 times. The readings are consistent." Something huge is moving in empty space between galaxies. Actually, multiple somethings. Grexval looked at the screen and his color changed from calm blue to worried purple. The gravity signatures were enormous, each one the size of a small moon, but the visual scanners showed only empty darkness. "Send this data to the Council immediately," he ordered, "and double our monitoring efforts." Similar reports flooded in from observatories across the galaxy. The Vega Deep Space Array detected movement in the void between spiral arms. The Kepler monitoring station recorded gravitational disturbances unlike anything in their databases. Even commercial shipping sensors began picking up anomalous readings. High Counselor Zenith received the first briefing in her private chambers. She listened with growing irritation as Captain Yorthuk of the Council Defense Fleet read the reports. Massive objects moving through deep space, invisible to standard scans but detectable by gravity sensors. Current count is 47 separate entities, each approximately 5 to 8 kilometers in diameter. "Ridiculous," Zenith said. "Objects that large would be visible from halfway across the galaxy. This is obviously a sensor malfunction caused by the new communication array. Ma'am, the objects appear to be moving toward inhabited systems. At current speed, the nearest ones will reach the outer colonies in approximately 72 hours. Zenith's ancient face remained calm, but her inner worry grew. In 3,000 years of life, she had never heard of anything like this. Have we tried communicating with these ... objects? Yes, ma'am. All standard frequencies, all known languages, no response. They're not sending any signals at all. They just keep moving toward populated space." Dr. Vexhai burst into the room without announcement, his multiple eyes wide with panic. "Counselor, the communication array!" "Something's wrong with it." "Calm yourself, Doctor. What exactly is wrong?" "It's not receiving communications like it should. Instead, it's broadcasting a signal I don't understand. And every time I try to shut it down, it restarts itself. The device has some kind of automatic system that won't let me turn it off." Zenith felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. "What kind of signal is it broadcasting?" "I don't know." "The frequency patterns are unlike anything in our databases. But whatever it's saying, it's being sent in all directions, even into deep space where nothing lives." Captain Yorthuk stepped forward. "Doctor, when did this broadcasting begin?" "About 6 hours ago, right after activation." "Why?" "Because that's exactly when we started detecting movement in empty space." The room fell silent. 3 of the galaxy's most powerful beings stood looking at each other, each beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. The first attack came 18 hours later. Colonist Pithra was tending her garden on the agricultural world of Haven's Rest when the sky went dark. She looked up, expecting to see storm clouds, but instead saw something that made her drop her tools and run. A massive shadow blocked out the sun. It wasn't a ship or a station, or anything she could identify. It was organic, alive, with a surface that rippled and pulsed like diseased skin. Tentacles the size of skyscrapers hung from its underside, swaying as the thing descended toward her world. She ran to her communication console and sent out a desperate message. "This is Haven's Rest Colony. Something huge is attacking us. We need help. We need..." The message cut off as the creature's tentacles touched the planet's surface. Where they made contact, the ground began to change. Plants withered and died. The soil turned black. Buildings started to crumble as if aging. Decades and seconds, but the most horrifying part was what happened to the people. The colonists who were touched by the creature's influence didn't die quickly. They dissolved slowly, their bodies breaking, down into pure energy that flowed up the tentacles and into the massive creature above. Their screams echoed across the colony until there was no one left to scream. Within 6 hours, Haven's Rest was gone. Not destroyed, not conquered, but consumed. The planet was left a dead, gray rock orbiting its star. The creature that had eaten it was now noticeably larger and moved on to the next system. Emergency council sessions were called across the galaxy. Defense fleets scrambled to respond to dozens of similar attacks. But when the ships arrived at The affected systems? They found only empty space and dead worlds. Admiral Corrival of the Zolani Defense Force led the first real engagement with one of the creatures. His fleet of 30 warships surrounded one of the entities as it approached the mining world of Zarian Prime. "All ships, open fire," he commanded. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, and particle beams struck the creature from every direction. The weapons that could destroy asteroids and cripple battlecruisers washed over the entity like gentle rain. The creature didn't even slow down. "Sir," his tactical officer shouted, "our weapons aren't penetrating its outer layer. It's like the energy is being absorbed." Admiral Corrival watched in horror as the creature extended massive tentacles toward his ships. Where the tentacles touched the hulls, the metal began to dissolve. His crews screamed as their ships were consumed around them, the energy of their bodies and vessels flowing into the growing monster. Only 3 ships escaped to report what happened. The news spread panic across the galaxy. These creatures, which scientists began calling devourers, seemed to eat everything they touched. Matter, energy, even the life force of living beings, all of it became food for their endless hunger. More creatures emerged from deep space every day. The Council's best scientists worked frantically to understand what they were fighting, but the Devourers defied every known law of physics. They existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that couldn't be measured or understood. Dr. Vexhai worked day and night trying to shut down the beacon device, but nothing worked. Every time he thought he had disabled it, the machine restarted itself. Worse, the signal it was broadcasting seemed to be getting stronger. "It's calling them," he told the emergency council session. "The device isn't malfunctioning. It's working. Exactly as designed, but not for communication. It's a beacon, calling these creatures to inhabited worlds. Then destroy it." High Counselor Zenith commanded. "I've tried everything. Plasma cutters, explosive charges, electromagnetic pulses, nothing damages it. The humans built this thing to survive any attempt to destroy it." Counselor Brent's wooden face creaked with worry. "How many creatures are there?" "Current count is over 200, with more emerging every hour. They're spreading across the galaxy, targeting every inhabited system they can find." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted accusations and demands. Some blamed the humans for leaving this trap behind. Others called for surrender to the creatures. A few suggested abandoning the galaxy entirely, but through the panic, one voice remained calm. Captain Dextra of the Zolani fleet had been studying the attack patterns. She stood up and waited for the shouting to die down. "There's something strange about how these creatures are moving," she said. "They're not random. They're following specific routes, avoiding certain sectors entirely." "What do you mean?" Zenith asked. "The Sol System. They're not going anywhere near human space. Every creature that gets close to the Sol System changes direction and goes somewhere else." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. "Are you saying, Counselor Vexhai?" asked slowly, "that the humans knew this would happen?" "I'm saying the humans are the only ones who aren't being attacked." In the depths of space, more devourers continued to emerge from the darkness between galaxies. They had waited so long for the barrier to fall, for the guardian species to abandon their watch. Now the feast could truly begin. The galaxy burned as ancient hunger finally awakened. And somewhere in the Sol System, humanity watched the stars die one by one, protected by defenses the Council had never imagined. The children of Earth had tried to warn them, but warnings given to the prideful fall on deaf ears. Now it was too late for anyone but themselves. The truth came from the most unlikely source. Junior Communications Officer Kelruth of the Proxima Defense Station was monitoring deep space channels when she picked up a fragment of transmission. It was weak, broken up by interference, but definitely human in origin. She had worked with human traders for years and recognized their communication patterns. Containment Protocol 77 Alpha has failed. Barrier network compromised. Repeat, the Watchers are awake. Kelruth leaned forward, adjusting her equipment to clean up the signal. The transmission was coming from the edge of council space, near the boundary with human territory. She had never heard humans use terms like containment protocol or barrier network before. Estimate 47 breaches in sectors 12 through 93. Devour emergence accelerating. Recommend immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel from border systems. The transmission cut to static. Kelrith tried to re-establish contact, but the signal was gone. She stared at her screen for a long moment before reaching for her emergency communication panel. 20 minutes later, Captain Nexra was listening to the recording in her ready room. She played it 3 times before calling her science officer. Lieutenant Morgan, have you ever heard humans use military terminology like this? The young officer shook his head. No, Captain. Human merchants and diplomats use trade language. And basic galactic standard, this sounds like a military operation. That's what I thought too. Captain Nexra made a decision that would change everything. Prepare a reconnaissance probe. I want to know what the humans are really doing at their border. Captain, that could be considered an act of espionage. If the Council finds out, the Council is too busy arguing about surrender to think clearly. Someone needs to find out what the humans know about these creatures. The probe launched 6 hours later, heading toward the buffer zone between Council and human space. What it found there changed Captain Nexra's understanding of everything. The probe's cameras showed massive structures in space, not ships, but installations the size of small moons. They were clearly human in design, but far more advanced than anything the Council had seen before. Energy readings were off the charts. Weapon signatures that dwarfed anything in the galactic arsenals, but most shocking of all was what the installations were doing. They were fighting. Captain Nexra watched in amazement as human defense platforms engaged creatures emerging from deep space. But these weren't the random devourers attacking Council worlds. These were different, larger, older, ancient things that had been sleeping in the void between galaxies for millions of years. The human weapons were unlike anything in Council databases. Beams of coherent energy that could cut through Devourer hide. Missiles that phased in and out of normal space to bypass the creature's dimensional defenses. Most incredible of all were devices that seemed to put the creatures back to sleep, forcing them to retreat into the darkness. How long have they been fighting? She whispered to herself. Her science officer ran calculations on the energy signatures. Based on power consumption patterns and structural wear? Decades, Captain, maybe centuries. Captain Nexra realized she was looking at the greatest military secret in galactic history. Humanity hadn't been exploring dangerous sectors for scientific curiosity or mineral rights. They had been standing guard, fighting a war the rest of the galaxy never knew existed. She ordered the probe to scan for more installations. What it found made her sick to her stomach. Hundreds of defense platforms scattered across human space. Monitoring stations that watched the deepest parts of the void. Massive ships that patrolled regions the Council had always assumed were empty. An entire military infrastructure designed for one purpose: keeping ancient horrors asleep. Now, with the humans gone from Council space, those horrors were waking up hungry. Captain Nexra compiled her findings and sent them directly to High Counselor Zenith with maximum security clearance. The response came back within an hour. Report to the Council chambers. Immediately, for emergency briefing, the Council chamber was in chaos when she arrived. Representatives were shouting at each other while screens around the room showed the latest casualty reports. 17 more worlds had fallen to the Devourers in the past day. Refugee fleets were fleeing toward the galactic core, but the creatures were following them. Order! Order! Zenith banged her staff against the floor. Captain Nexra has important information about the human situation. The chamber fell silent as Captain Nexra activated her presentation. The first image showed the massive human defense installations. This is what we found at the human border, she began. These structures have been there for centuries. The humans have been fighting creatures like the Devourers for longer than any of us realized. Counselor Vexhai stared at the screen. Impossible. We would have detected military installations that large. They were hidden using technology we don't understand. Sensor screens, dimensional cloaking, quantum camouflage. The humans have been fighting a secret war to protect the galaxy. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives accused her of spreading human propaganda. Others demanded proof, but Captain Nexra wasn't finished. "There's more," she said, activating the next set of images. "These are recordings of human forces engaging ancient devourers. Watch what happens." The screen showed a human fleet surrounding a massive creature, easily 3 times larger than anything attacking Council space. But instead of consuming the ships, the creature was retreating. Human weapons were forcing it back into the darkness between galaxies. "They know how to fight." "Them," Captain Nexra said quietly. "Not just the new ones, but the old ones. The ancient ones that have been sleeping since before any of our civilizations existed." High Counselor Zenith had grown very pale. "Are you saying the humans have been protecting us?" "I'm saying the humans have been holding back an invasion. That would have destroyed the galaxy millions of years ago. And when we made it impossible for them to maintain their guard posts in Council space, they withdrew to protect only themselves." The truth hit the Council like a physical blow. For 3 centuries they had seen human expansion as aggression, human military presence as a threat, human research stations as territorial grabs. But the humans had been building a wall between civilized space and the hungry darkness beyond. Dr. Vexhai spoke in a broken voice. "The quantum device, it wasn't for communication." "No," Captain Nexra confirmed. "Based on what I've seen, it was part of a network. A barrier system that kept the ancient creatures asleep. When you activated it incorrectly, you sent out a wake-up call instead of a lullaby. The implications were staggering. Every human military exercise had been a defensive drill. Every human research station had been a monitoring post. Every human territorial expansion had been extending the protective barrier further into dangerous space, and the Council had driven them away." "Can we contact them?" Zenith asked desperately. "Can we ask for their help?" Captain Nexra activated her final piece of evidence. It was a message her probe had intercepted from human military communications. The voice was cold, professional, and completely without hope for galactic cooperation. "Council territories now designated as lost sectors. Maintain defensive perimeter at current boundaries. No assistance to be provided to Council forces." "Repeat." "No assistance. Earth command out." The chamber fell into stunned silence. Outside, another star system went dark as the Devourers consumed everything that lived there. The creatures were moving faster now, growing stronger with each world they ate. Counselor Brent's wooden voice creaked with despair. "How many more are coming?" Captain Nexra checked her data. Based on the beacon's signal strength and the emergence. Pattern dozens, maybe tens of thousands. The ancient ones that have been sleeping since the galaxy was young. The humans have been keeping them dormant for 300 years. "And now they're all waking up," Zenith whispered in the soul. "System?" Admiral Jackson watched the tactical displays showing Devourer movements throughout Council space. His orders were clear: protect human worlds and let the galaxy burn. The politicians had made their choice when they drove humanity out of galactic affairs, but watching entire civilizations die was harder than he had expected. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we're receiving desperate messages from Council forces. They're begging for help." Admiral Jackson stared at the screens showing the collapse of galactic civilization. Species that had mocked human warnings were now crying for human salvation. The same aliens who had called humans primitive warmongers were begging for protection from the monsters they had accidentally awakened. "No response," he said finally. "We tried to warn them. We tried to protect them. They chose pride over wisdom." The galaxy burned while Earth's children watched from behind barriers their ancestors had built. 300 years of thankless service had taught them one lesson. Some mistakes cannot be forgiven. Some warnings come only once. 3 months after the first Devourer attack, half the galaxy was dark. High Counselor Zenith stood alone in her private chamber, looking out at the stars through reinforced windows. Many of those lights had been extinguished forever. Entire civilizations, reduced to nothing more than energy-feeding ancient monsters from the void. The Council's great capital world of Centralis was one of the last major planets still holding out. Massive defense fleets surrounded it, but everyone knew they wouldn't last long. The Devourers had grown stronger with each world they consumed. What started as creatures the size of small moons were now massive entities that could swallow star. Systems Hold. Her aide, a young ethereal named Centaur, entered quietly. Counselor, the final evacuation ships are ready to depart. The defense fleet commanders estimate we have 6 hours before the Devourers reach the system. Zenith didn't turn around. In 3,000 years of life, she had never imagined the galaxy could die so quickly. Any word from the outer colonies? No, ma'am. The last transmission from the Vega Collective was 18 hours ago. After that, silence. 18 hours. An entire interstellar nation had been consumed in less than a day. Billions of beings who had lived and loved and dreamed, all gone. Fed to creatures that had been sleeping since before intelligence evolved? In the galaxy, what about our final message to the humans? Centaur's expression grew uncomfortable. Delivered, ma'am, but ... But? The response was ... brief. Zenith finally turned around. Her ancient face was calm, but her eyes held the weight of galactic extinction. Show me. Centaur activated a holographic display. The message was simple text, just 2 words in basic galactic standard. Earth remembers. Zenith stared at those words for a long time. 2 words that carried the weight of 3 centuries of human sacrifice. 3 centuries of humans dying in the darkness to protect aliens who hated them for it. 3 centuries of warnings ignored and help refused. Ma'am, Centaur said quietly, the evacuation ships are waiting for your order. Tell them to go. Zenith said, I'll take the next transport. But they both knew there wouldn't be a next transport. The Devourers were too close now, and there was nowhere left to run. The creatures had consumed most of the galaxy's inhabitable worlds. Soon they would finish their feast and return to the darkness between galaxies. Leaving behind only empty space and dead stars, Centaur hesitated at the door. Counselor, do you think we could have done things differently? Zenith looked back out at the dying stars. Yes, we could have listened. We could have been grateful instead of resentful. We could have supported the humans instead of driving them away. Would it have made a difference? The humans kept those creatures asleep for 300 years, Centaur. If we had helped them instead of hindering them... She trailed off. There was no point in imagining better outcomes now. After her aide left, Zenith accessed her private communication console. She composed one final message and transmitted it toward the Sol system. She knew the humans would never respond, but she needed to say the words that should have been said centuries ago. In the Sol system, Admiral Jackson received the message on the bridge of the UES Defender. His communications officer handed him the datapad without comment. From High Counselor? Zenith of the Galactic Council, the officer said. Personal message, highest priority. Admiral Jackson read the message twice before setting it down. Around him, his bridge crew worked quietly, monitoring the defenses that protected humanity's home system. The screens showed the massive orbital stations that had been hidden for centuries, weapons platforms that dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen, and barrier generators that kept the ancient hunger at bay. Sir? His executive officer asked. Any response? Admiral Jackson thought about the message. An apology from the leader of a dying civilization. An acknowledgement of humanity's sacrifice. A plea for forgiveness that came too late to save anyone but Earth. No response, he said finally. Continue monitoring the barriers? The final battle for Centralis lasted 3 hours. Captain Nexra commanded the last defense fleet, knowing her ships were no match for the creatures approaching the system. The Devourers that emerged from hyperspace were unlike anything seen before. Ancient entities as large as planets, their surfaces crawling with millions of feeding tentacles. They had grown fat on galactic civilization and were now impossibly powerful. All ships begin attack pattern Alpha, she commanded. Even though she knew it was hopeless, the Council fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, antimatter missiles, experimental weapons that had never been tested in battle. The energy output was enough to sterilize a dozen worlds. It barely scratched the leading Devourer. The creature's response was swift and terrible. Massive tentacles reached out across space, wrapping around Council ships and beginning the slow process of consumption. Captain Nexra watched her fleet dissolve ship by ship, the energy of their crews and hulls flowing into the growing monster. "Captain," her tactical officer shouted. "Something's happening to the creature." Captain Nexra looked at her screens and saw something impossible. The massive devourer was slowing down. Its tentacles were withdrawing from her ships. For a moment she thought they had somehow damaged it. Then she saw the real reason: the soul. System's outer perimeter was visible on long-range sensors, and it was lighting up like a star. Massive energy signatures that had been hidden for centuries were now fully active. The humans weren't just defending their home system anymore. They were projecting their barriers outward, creating a growing sphere of protection that the devourers could not enter. But the barrier wasn't expanding to save the galaxy. It was expanding to contain the threat. Captain Nexra realized what the humans were doing just before her ship was caught in the barrier field. The humans were creating a prison. Everything inside the expanding barrier would be trapped with the devourers. The creatures would consume what remained of galactic civilization, then be locked away forever in a dimensional cage. The humans were willing to sacrifice half the galaxy to ensure these creatures never threatened anyone else. "Captain," her communications officer said with wonder in her voice, "we're receiving a transmission. It's from Earth." The message was audio only, but Captain Nexra recognized the voice from the intercepted military communications. Admiral Jackson of the human fleet. "To all surviving Council forces," the voice said calmly, "you are now within the containment barrier. The devourers will complete their feeding cycle within the barrier, then return to dormancy. The barrier will hold them permanently. Earth's children will maintain the watch from outside." Captain Nexra felt tears running down her face. The humans were saving the galaxy by sacrificing everything the devourers hadn't already consumed. They were accepting the loss of half of known space to protect the half that remained. "Why?" she transmitted back. "Why save us after everything?" "We did?" There was a long pause before Admiral Jackson responded. "Because someone has to remember what was lost. Someone has to learn from our mistakes. Someone has to do better next time." The transmission ended. Captain Nexra looked at her crew and saw the same understanding in their eyes. They were witnesses now? Survivors who would carry the truth to whatever came after. The barrier completed its expansion 12 hours later. Inside, the last devourers fed on the remnants of Centralis and other surviving worlds. Outside, the human fleet maintained their eternal watch, ensuring the creatures could never escape their prison. The galaxy was broken now, split between the dead zone where monsters fed and the protected space where life could still exist. It would take millions of years for the barrier zone to be safe again, if ever, but in the protected regions, new civilizations would rise. They would find the records left by the Council survivors. They would learn about the humans who had stood guard in the darkness for 3 centuries. They would understand the price of taking protectors for granted, and perhaps if they were wise, they would remember to say thank you to those who guard the darkness. High Counselor Zenith died on Centralis as the devourers consumed her world. Her last act was to record a message for future generations. We were protected by those we scorned. We were saved by those we drove away. Remember the humans. Remember their sacrifice. Remember to be grateful for those who stand watch in the darkness. The message was transmitted just before the end, carried beyond the barrier by human relay stations. Somewhere in the protected galaxy, new species would find it and learn from the Council's mistakes. The humans had saved the galaxy by losing half of it. They had chosen wisdom over vengeance, sacrifice over retribution. Earth remembered. And Earth endured that in the darkness between galaxies. Ancient things slept once more, locked away by barriers that would never fall. The Human Watch continued as it always had, as it always would, silent guardians protecting a galaxy that finally understood the cost of protection.